Hi everyone, it's Michael Jeffries again, and today we're going to look at the battle of the YouTube chess commentators. This game has been long awaited to be put on YouTube. I just wasn't in a hurry to do it. Now is the time. My opponent was Daniel Berman, who also has many good chess videos on YouTube, and he's a very good friend of mine. And there's kind of a funny story behind this game. We were both playing at the Santa Monica Bay Chess Club quads, and Danny was the top seed. He was rated 2134. He's a very strong expert, and I'm 1761. And before the round started, I was showing Danny my opening. I was saying, "Hey, Danny, if I'm black, here's my repertoire. Here's what I'm going to play," because Danny's a good friend of mine, and I figure he'd give me some feedback as to what he thought. And so I go through my entire opening. If white does this, I'm going to do this, then this. And about 5 minutes later, when the round's getting ready to start, Danny walks up to me and says, "Hey, guess who you're playing?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "Yeah, and I'm white." And I was like, "Oh, no." So I just had shown him my entire repertoire as black, and now I had to face him in the first round, and I was just sick. But my good friend Sean Williams came up and just told me to take this seriously, that I could beat him if I really try. And I really appreciated Sean doing that, because sometimes you need to smack yourself, forget ratings, just play chess. And so I decided that's what I was going to do. So I put my game face on, Danny sat down, and here's the game. He played e4. He's an e4 player, and I responded with this center counter. I figured, well, it's what I play, so I'm not going to vary it. But he actually varied here. As you know, the most common move is to take the pawn, but he played knight c3, and that's kind of an unusual move. Now, the funny thing is, Danny had told me, I don't know, like 9 months earlier, this move. He was the one that showed it to me, and he said to me, "Well, Michael, if they ever played against you, a good line is just knight f6." And that's what I played, because Danny, I thought it was kind of funny that here I was playing the line against the guy who showed it to me. But it turns out that knight f6 actually is not the best move. Junior 10 actually prefers d4 here, and thinks that's the best move for black. And then the knight can go back to e2, and now you just develop your knight, and white should probably play d3 and get a solid position. If he plays e5, it's not a problem. You just go knight g4, attacking the pawn on e5, and he probably has to play something like f4 and c5, and if he kicks the knight, you can just come back to h6. And I wanted to point out that you not only have the f5 square here for this knight on h6 later on, but also you hear players talk about dark square weaknesses, and this is a good example of it. Because these pawns are on light squares, all the dark squares around the king would be vulnerable. So this is just a really good example of that. But this didn't happen, so let's go back to the game. And in the game, I played f6, and Danny pushed, and I pushed on his knight. I can actually retreat the knight. It turns out that you can just play this move, knight fd7. It's kind of a funny move. It's not a very natural move, because you're undeveloping. It looks like the knight's on a bad square. Knight f3, defending the pawn on e5. Then you can play this surprising move c5. And the trick is, it looks like your pawn on d5 is hanging, but then you just take back on e5, uncovering your queen on the knight. And after he takes on e5, you take queen takes d5, and so you get your pawn back. And actually, black's doing fine here. So anyway, back to the game. I played d4. He played pawn takes knight. I take his knight. He plays pawn takes g7. The computer likes a little gambit here. Actually, after I take the knight, the computer actually likes bishop d3, just letting black decide, which pawn he wants to take, and getting on with development. And that's not a bad idea, actually, because then Danny could play knight f3 and castle, and black's way behind in development, so that might have been a good move for him. But he played pawn. Sorry, that's my dog. Wiener man, shh, quiet. I have a little miniature dachshund here that thinks he's a big German Shepherd. So he took on G7, and I played pawn takes pawn check on D2, and because it's check, he has to deal with it, so he took back with the bishop. And then I played bishop takes G7. So here we are. The position is pretty equals. You're going to see a little later on, though, that the pawn islands are in White's favor. If you notice, White has one pawn island here and one pawn island on the queen side, so that's two. And I've got 1, 2, 3. And you'll see another example of that later on when the squares light up. But it just shows that White is a little better just because of the pawn structure, and that's pretty much the only advantage here for White. But it could be a big one if it gets to the endgame, which it will. So here Danny played c3, pawn to c3, just blunting the diagonal. But there are some tricks here, and let's take a look at them. The computer likes queen f3, and just offering the pawn on b2, and if bishop takes, then you don't move the rook. You play bishop c4, and notice that now f7 is under attack, and black has to deal with that. You can't allow that. So castles is one way to deal with it, and that's the one the computer likes. But then queen g3 check, and king in the corner, and now bishop c3 saves the rook because it's with check. And so this is all forced. Bishop takes, queen takes. And now black has to play f6 here. If he goes king g8, he can get into some trouble because the rook gets in the game quickly. Rook d1 hitting the queen, knight blocks, knight f3, and White's doing well here. He's going to castle next move. Black's in this pin. The knight on d7's pinned, and the king is exposed, and a rook could lift and come over, and black can get checkmated very easily in this position. So anyway, that would have been an interesting try. But back to the game. So Danny played c3, and I centralized my queen, and a queen in the center of the board is very powerful, and that was another thing I picked up from Danny. Danny and I are really good friends. We hang out every weekend and we play chess together, and because he's stronger than me, I'm always picking up ideas from him. So it was, both intimidating and exciting playing him at the same time. And so let's see, queen d5 and centralizing the queen, knight f3 developing. I developed my knight to c6. He played bishop to e3. I developed my bishop to e6, and now I'm preparing to castle queenside. And I took back. He didn't really have anything better, I think, so that was fine. Bishop e2. I castled queenside. He castled kingside. I brought my rook opposite his king. He played rook f d1. And now I really like this next move. I decided to activate my bishops, and the way I did it was with knight e5, attacking his knight. And when he took, I was able to take back with my bishop. And now a lot of things are lighting up. The first thing is that I've got this attack here on g2 with the rook on g8 and the bishop on d5. So he's got to deal with that in a second. But also, here's what I was telling you about the pawn structure, and it's very graphic. You can definitely see that black's got 3 islands, and you definitely want the least amount of islands that you can have, because it can turn out to be vulnerable, a pawn by itself, when it can't be protected by other pawns. So in the game, Danny stopped the threat on g2 by playing pawn to g3. And now I was concerned with him taking the a7 pawn, but I didn't want to move it because I didn't want to make any weaknesses, because these bishops could come in here and perhaps get me in some trouble with some checks. So I just moved my king over because I just wasn't sure which pawn to move, so I thought I would just protect him with the king.